I'm going to try my best again to kind of cover some of the basics of Gita, because here we are going to go into some further depth. Um, um, so so let's talk a little bit about the background, since all of this is kind of new to some of you guys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first six chapters, what happens just briefly. So there is a warrior on the battlefield. His name is Arjuna. And this is a battlefield war between two. By the way, am I sharing my screen? I think I am, right? Or no? No, I'm not. Um,
Are you able to share? Okay, good.
I'm going to share now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So so what happens is he is being ridden on a driven on a chariot, and he has chosen his close friend Krishna, and he doesn't know Krishna has this deeper understanding about life or whatnot. He's just his pal, and he has chosen him to be the charioteer, and he is supposed to be on one side, the lead warrior, if you will, and on the other side is his cousin who is trying to steal the whole kingdom, which rightfully belongs to Arjuna. Um, so it's a battle, and the the so what happens is he realizes after, and there's like a whole epic that has happened prior to getting to the stage. So it takes a long time to get to this point where the battle is about to happen, and there is all kinds of politics and this and that, fights and all of that stuff is happening during that time. And so now the battlefield, this is the last moment, sort of like the climax, if you will. And Arjuna suddenly kind of feels dejected. He is like wondering, why are we fighting this war right at the moment of the war? And he starts having these double mind, like, oh, wait a second, this is all my family on the other side, and it's going to be my grandpa is fighting against me on the other side, and my teacher, who's my favorite teacher, he's also fighting from the other side. So what if they are lost in their choice? But is it even right for me to fight this war, right? So he starts asking these questions at that moment. And um, now all of this at the first time when you read that chapter 1, it just seems like, wow, Arjuna is such a nice guy. And, we, the way to interpret that first chapter from our point of view is, we come to this kind of a stage in life, or, we kind of evade, I would say. Most of the time we are evading, and we are trying to be nice, and we are trying to comply with the society's version of nice. And we go along with in the life, almost kind of like floating, without even noticing life pass by or the depth of it. So it really needs, like when these kind of moments happen, not specifically this battlefield moment, but there are moments like this where you wonder, deeper questions that come to your mind is, am I doing this as an obligation to the society, or do I want to do this, right? So two different things. So many a times we are clobbered in our minds about what the society expects of us, and with the social media and all of that stuff, it has become even more worst problem these days, right? Where, it is all about getting the validation from the other parties involved or anybody. And now, your reach can go beyond your, immediate friends to all the other people who are on the social media, right? So you're trying to align with what they think. So the independent thought in that process has it's kind of a lost art in a way for us. We comply, we follow along with what the society wants you to do. So Arjuna in that first chapter is kind of saying these things, but if you look at some of the history of how this day happens, 3 days before that, there has been a certain conversation with the other side, his uncle, and the uncle is trying to convey to him, look, you want to fight the war on this silly kingdom, but he himself is keeping the kingdom for himself, and he's giving him all this, what good people should do and this and that. So that is kind of at the background of his head when he is coming up with these ideas about like, hey, if I kill these people, we are going to go to hell, and there's all kinds of horrible things that is going to happen. Men are going to die, women are going to become widows, and this and that, and kids are not going to have a father. Just like there's a whole series of bad things that he explains in chapter 1 as to why he shouldn't fight the war. Um, And that's when Krishna, his friend, he listens to that, and he kind of just wakes him up, and he says, look, you're acting like a coward. If you fight this war, um, you're going to win it. And you might win it or you might not win it. Here you're assuming that you're going to win it, and the other party is going to get killed by you. But regardless of you win or not, you are a born warrior. And we are here at the war, and everybody is waiting for you, and you have to continue with what you have started. And if you notice, what happens at the beginning is that Arjuna asks Krishna, hey, can you drive the chariot along the battlefield? Because I want to see who is on the other side. So Krishna, being Krishna and a bit of a mischievous person, he specifically takes him right in front of the loved ones on the other side. Had he taken him in front of the hateful person on the other side, the Duryodhana, his cousin against whom he's trying to fight this war, he would have not even thought about this whole chapter 1. He would have immediately killed him. But because he takes him in front of the loved ones, and I think this is the way to interpret this is, life is going to throw you into situations that you really will feel the uncomfortableness at that point, in the sense that, am I supposed to do this or am I supposed to do that? And those are the times where I think Gita comes to your rescue in a way, right? So battlefield is our own battlefield, like as we are going through our lives. So this whole chapter 13 is about the field and the knower, right? So what is this field? Krishna is going to explain to us. And who is this knower? But let's just continue with this, right? So in chapter 2, then Krishna explains to him, look, you're talking about all this thing about going away from your family and trying to be this good person, and you want to be a sannyasi or a renunciate and all that stuff. Let me tell you exactly what renunciation means. What is it exactly? And then he tells him about karma or action. And there is such a thing as an action for gain, and then there is an action for the action's sake, or gain or loss, or something that is done out of anger or fear is one type of an action, which you can call as karma. And that karma kind of builds on itself, and you have to continuously do that stuff. The other thing is an actionless action, in a way, where you as a doer have not participated in that action, yet you have done the action. So like, he was called here for a warrior, and he has to do what is right, right? So there is the whole chapter 2 and 3 kind of extols on this notion of what is doing, and when we are doing, how we should not bring ourselves as I am doing it, versus it is being done through me, like two different ways to look at it, right? And Arjuna is in the phase of listening at that point, right? He is really, that the first chapter of dejection is something absolutely crucial in all of our lives where, an existential crisis comes to us and we start questioning the existence and this superficial living that we are doing, where we cannot really see the depth of us as human being. Why can we look at something and feel happy about it? Or why do we look at something and go sad? And why can we understand something? I'm speaking something, you are understanding, and I'm speaking, so there's certain kind of a something higher is going on within us, even on the mundane, smallest thing that we do, when we eat, yeah, I don't know, drink coffee or something, something really benign things that we do around. There is a certain element of joy or anger. There is a notion of I-ness, I am learning this, I am hating this, I am liking this. So that's it. That is that deeper, when you're doing it, you forget that, you are the joy or sorrow is coming to you because you're so much focused on this thing that is giving you the joy. So you associate that thing to your joy and you forget that, man, this me is something more than this. And we are continuously chasing this outside object, this or the other or the other or the other, or we are running away from this or the other or the other or the other, right? And this is what Arjuna, in a way, he was doing his entire life. And here he comes to where he has been called for an action, and he is he's speaking this very high philosophical language to kind of get away from his duty. And uh, Krishna is waking him up, right? And because he has gone through this deeper existential crisis in that moment, he has this ability to listen. See, when we just live a very superficial life, um, sometimes all this knowledge that is around us, and we sometimes innately know something, but we are not listening to that inner voice. We are continuously we're not listening. We have lost the ability to listen because we uh, we kind of keep ourselves busy in the noise that is out there, and we cannot like pull ourselves away from that noise and sit with one problem and kind of address it. We don't. We are continuously wanting to do something out there. So that reaching out stops us from listening. So the first section was really the focus on how something brought him to the point where he is willing to listen. And then, chapter 4 talks about what is the right action. The idea is that we all do something. We all are always doing something. We cannot not do anything, right? So when we are doing something, the idea is that he says, change the doing part to use that doing to clean yourself. What does that even mean? Not that you're doing any evil or anything like that. He doesn't really talk about sin or nothing of that sort, right? All he's saying is that when you're doing something, watch yourself. If this I am doing it type of a notion comes into that doing, that's a bad action. Done. That is an unclean action. So immediately you change that notion. You're doing it, and you're not the doer. This is happening because there is a certain skill that you have achieved, not because of you, because of just everything that the universe has given. And you have been brought to this moment and you are doing it. And you need to find the joy in just the doing part, not worry about the results. Because that's the other thing that we focus too much on is the winning part and the results, if it is a good result or a bad result, and that kind of both of them kind of hurt us, pleasure and pain. Um, and the idea is when you're doing this action, it's not about you're fixing the world. World doesn't need us. World is fine by itself. But you should be thankful that something has brought this about where you are going to do this action. So this changes the whole attitude towards that action now, right? Because there is one way where you say, look, I'm this expert and I know this and I am doing this and I'm fixing your problem. So it puts the other person down and you go at this high level. right? And which is what Arjuna was trying to do. He's like, hey, look, I want to play this really peaceful guy, and I want to run away from this war, and I am fine to give away my kingdom, and I'm going to become this renunciate and all that. So all very highfalutin ideas, but Krishna knows this is not going to work because that's not his fundamental nature. And the whole idea is that you want to use your day-to-day very silly actions that you do, drinking water, serving water to somebody, cleaning or whatnot, anything that you do, bring the attention back to this whole notion of who am I? Like who am I? Like, what is this? Right. And I think that suddenly the action becomes not about fixing the world, but fixing myself, because as if we are cleaning all the layers that the society has brought about around us. And then, in chapter 5, he talks about the meditation and all that stuff. So meditation somehow, we have come to an understanding that we got to close our rooms and sit in the room and have this chants going on for 1 hour. And after that hour, you go about your business in the world and do all the shit that you were doing before that, right? So when I read Gita, that's not the understanding that I walk away from, right? Meditation is every walk of your life. You wake up in the morning, you walk around, do your thing. You're continuously watching your mind wavering at that particular action or anything that you're doing. Or if something is causing you anger, something is causing you fear, or something is making you feel like, oh, I'm doing this better. Why isn't that not being accepted by this other person, right? That is the part that you want to renounce. And this is where Gita is kind of unique in the sense that it says you want to live in this world, participate in all the good, bad actions on this planet, capitalism, communism, whatnot. It doesn't matter. Be here. And the idea is, what are we renouncing? We're not renouncing all the billions of dollars that you're making. That's not what you're supposed to renounce. What you're renouncing is this doership. Like whenever the notion comes in your mind that I am doing it and I deserve this, that is the part you just have to kind of chop at it. And it is the most difficult task, and it is the highest penance, if you will. The penance is not that, oh, I'm going to fast for 25 days and that is going to somehow make the world a better place. No, it doesn't. If you watch yourself, that is going to be a much more, and this is what he kind of explains that, right? Um, and then, chapter 6 comes along, and the idea is that when you are doing this, don't do it as if like, oh my God, I got to give up something. But you will realize over time that, this anger and fear is not chasing me, neither are the goals chasing me. And there is a certain different kind of happiness that comes about in your actions in day to day. And that is sort of a self-analysis of what is happening. You don't have to tell anybody. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody should be judging you, and you shouldn't be judging the other person. This is your own personal journey, right? So that is the whole thing about first 6 is about addressing our lives where everything is based around actions. So if we are based around working, how can we utilize that to really get to this place where, it is all about dhyana or meditation and all that stuff, not by, doing any rituals, no temples, no God, nothing of that sort, right? It's about watching yourself, right? So that is uh, so the focus here is, the Tattvamasi means you are that. That is the very famous saying in the Vedanta thing. You are that, meaning that is, something out there, which is the God, right? What the highest teaching in Upanishad is, you are that, you are the God. So the first thing is Tattvamasi, Tattvam. Tat means you, Tvam is, that, right? So Asi means are. So first part is all about you, this is our life. And if we can just work on this 6, we really don't need the next part, right? But this is absolutely crucial that we bring about in our lives, in our day-to-day, watching ourselves. And then immediately what happens, at that point is that, when he goes to chapter 7, you start realizing that a sort of a notion of devotion comes into your life automatically on its own. It doesn't have to be Christianity, it doesn't have to be Muslim, doesn't have to be Hinduism, nothing of that. All of that is, if that is what helps you, great. But it is not about that, right? The idea is that a certain humility comes about in your life. And this notion of one-pointedness, the whole idea of calming your mind is your mind wants to think about 15 things, and you are 100 people at the same time, if you look at your thoughts. And you're not really living here. You're living in that thought which is going to make you happy tomorrow after something happens, or the day after when that particular thing happens. And you're building these imaginary things, right? So in a way, everything's unreal. Everything is a lie that we are living in when we are just constantly thinking about tomorrow, right? So that's why one of the things that they say is all of this is a Maya, or a sort of a hypnotic state in a way. So 7 to 12 is all about, now that the humility has come about, what you want to do is, the number of times your mind is wavering about, can we just focus that mind on one thing? And the one thing, you might want to call it God, but if you're strong enough, you can use some other concept where, you just focus on that one thing, right? And the humility also brings about in the person who has walked chapter 1 to 6 is in an appreciation of the fact that there are certain things we know with our senses, but there is a vast unknown. And this vast unknown, there is two ways to go about it. One is, oh, I just don't know that, and that's God, and I'm going to forget about it, right? It is beyond me, and that is one way. The other way is, you say, oh no, if I can't sense it, it doesn't exist, right? So that's another way, right? So these two can fall into the buckets of blind faith versus atheism, in a way, if you will, right? But both of those are, we really don't know. We certain things that we don't know, and God exists, not exists, that's kind of moot in a way. But there are certain things that we don't know. So to kind of conclude on something based on our senses is kind of silly. So the 7 to 12 is all about, now you are really opening up to understand this unknown, because a humility has come about. Because before the first 6 chapters, there was this I-ness, I'm doing this, I understand this particular domain of physics and science or whatnot, and I'm great, and I made multi-million-dollars, and it's all about I, right? So you cannot appreciate the unknown part. So, but the whole action, the chapter 1 to 6, kind of is supposed to make us humble about the world. And now you're open to really understanding. But if you're not there, then chapter 7 through 12 is also kind of like, it just feels like mumbo jumbo, which is, I've gone through this phase in the past. Where the notion of devotion or God just find one will find kind of ridiculous. It's like, what is that? Why are we even doing that? And there's so many wars around us about religion and all this, and here is yet another book trying to tell us about God and this and all that stuff. But there is more to it, in the sense that you have gone through the act of cleansing yourself, and now you're willing to understand the unknown. So he talks about, in chapter 7, he talks about all these, what is this state of hypnosis that happens? And the notion of bhakti is introduced, which is the devotion, and how one can utilize that to reach the Paramatma. What is reaching the Paramatma? Reaching the Paramatma doesn't mean that there is this Hindu god by the name Paramatma. That's not the point. The point is that there is this higher self that we all have, If we can appreciate the fact that we can understand, we can talk, we can interpret, we can taste, we can smell. There's all these mundane things that we take for granted. There's something higher that is allowing this body, this physical body, which deteriorates, for us to do this. And that higher thing, you might call it Paramatma, you can call it God, or you might not call it anything. That's okay. But you try to realize that. And the whole idea is that, what does realization mean? Realization means that you are going in your daily living to that state, and you're living as if Paramatma is living, right? As if when, one of the examples they give is when sun is shining, sun is not really saying, oh, I like these roses, so I'm going to shine on the roses, but this puddle of mess, I'm not going to shine on that. So sun is completely blind to these differences that, we tend to see. So it is just shining equally. So the equanimity is what is the key. And that is what ultimately we want to achieve. So the first six is supposed to live in the world and appreciate your actions. And you bring about that equanimity when you're dealing with mundane things, really humble things, or really great things, that actions that you're doing. So chapter 9, he talks about formless. There's something that we don't know that supports all these forms, the flower or the seeds that grow, or we human beings, the way we are born, and all of that stuff. There's something deeper that is definitely unaffected by forms. Another example is our eyes do the same thing, right? When we are looking through our eyes can see good and bad equally well. Obviously, you don't want to look at the eclipse, but the point is that the good and bad is not going to impact our eye in a way. If we tend to want to not look at something, it is mostly because of our disgust. And that is some deeper notion, deeper emotion than just the eye itself. And so the 7 through 12, the first six, in effect, was kind of like a listening phase. And 7 to 12 is sort of like Arjuna saying, well, show me, I'm now curious. Not show me as if like, well, why don't you prove it to me? Like that's not, you're not humble anymore, right? It's, you really like want to appreciate this more. And he says, what are your forms? Can you tell me? Like, how can I see them? Where can I see you? Right? He asks that. And he talks about vibhuti, right? Where he says, anything good you see, anything amazing you see, like Grand Canyon, or, I gave some examples like Elon Musk, some people like him, right? Or anybody you like, movie star or something. I mean, that level of height that they have reached in their ability, there's something in the life force that gives that ability. So what Krishna says is, appreciate the God there, right? Because that is easy for us to appreciate. Ultimately, you want to appreciate everything equally, but he says that's hard. So start with things that your eyes tend to gravitate. Our eyes want to see these amazing things in the world. When you see that, good, you've seen it, but turn it inwards and realize that, wow, there's something amazing going on. Some amazing life forces going on. This trying to see that one formless, unknown in every daily observation, right? So once you have that, what happens is you're training your eyes, you're training your way of looking at things, again, bringing that humility in you, right? And you're looking, you're not trying to find problems, because that's most of the time what we are ending up doing, and hurting ourselves and hurting a lot of people in the process. But here you are appreciating life in a way, right? As it is being manifested in things that you can easily appreciate. So then chapter 11 comes about, and he says, this is amazing, and I want to see for myself this nature of Virat. Virat means this vastness that you are talking about. And it is so overwhelming. Like, I understand what you're saying, but, all of this is so overwhelming. And the way I interpret this, and there's two ways to interpret. One is that Krishna, being such a deep person, he explains to Arjuna in a fashion that relays or conveys the notion of vastness. That is one. The other is, let's say Krishna was not there. This is just an inner voice, inner talking, inner discussion that Arjuna is having, and he realizes that, oh man, I forgot, I did not see greatness in this person or that person, or all that. And then you suddenly realize, man, everything, people getting born, people dying, and people, things happening and all of that stuff, it's just overwhelming. It's just such a huge thing, right? And it could it just be a one solid atomic thing, like this one solid thing, and so many things are happening in that one thing, right? It just is very overwhelming at that point, when one comes to this understanding. So it's either an inner journey or it's a journey along with Krishna. Um, so, and then we come to chapter 12, where he talks about the fact that, one of the question Arjuna asks, and, we have that question too. We have a great example in Buddha, where Buddha basically said that, I don't believe in God. That is one. And then you have all these other people who are also great examples, like Saint Francis, let's say, on the Christianity side, or there's all kinds of great examples all across the world. But in India, there is saints like Kabir and Meera. If you look at them, they have made their whole life about praying, writing these amazing poetry about they seem like they're about God, but they are more about life. If you really kind of peel off the layer of God from that. And so, and they're happy, they're playing the music, and they are dancing and all of that stuff. So they are exuding sort of joy in life, if you will. And then you have Buddha. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But Buddha has this austere understanding, a deeper understanding of, like, it's nothingness, right? And that's another way of looking at life. So we have that example. So one thought comes to our mind, what is the right path? Are we supposed to follow what Buddha says, or are we supposed to follow these people who dance like crazy, or they are singing hymns like crazy and all that stuff, right? They both just don't seem right. And sometimes, we gravitate towards something only out of a societal pressure, where we say, oh, like everybody like talks nice about Buddha, maybe that's what I should do. Well, what Krishna says is that, he says, while that is a good path that Buddha has taken, obviously he doesn't talk about Buddha, but the dhyana, the mechanism of jnana, right, knowledge, which is what we're going to talk about. While that is good, where this unknown is formless, and you can immediately understand the formlessness of everything in the world. That's why everything becomes unique and one to you. So you're not picking and choosing, you're not hating or loving, right? So while that can happen to some people, it is the most difficult path for everybody, because we are wired to love and hate. So one of the things he says is that, in 7 through 12, he says, well, until you will reach to what Buddha has achieved, but until you reach there, assume a certain form God, is there, and do that one-on-one working with that God, be it a little statue and whatnot, right? Doesn't matter what it is. But the formed God, he says, is easier for us to build all these abilities that he talks about. And then automatically, your journey will gravitate towards this understanding about the world, or even the fact that you are putting all your devotion and your depth of life into this piece of rock. That itself is amazingly marvelous. But then now you can take it to the next step, where you start seeing amazing things in your kid, in your son, in your husband, in your friend, in your neighbor who you hate, or some politician that you hate. And it kind of starts like, if you can put your devotion into this piece of rock, why not in a living being who is this, exuding intelligence and all that stuff. Not that you have to be enslaved to him, but the fact that you can now see good things in that person is something that changes you, not the other person. He might still be doing all kinds of crazy things, but it is not up to you to fix that person. It's up to us to fix us. So formless, he says, is very difficult. So he says that, once you have done all the action cleanup and all that stuff, it becomes easier for you to follow certain upasana means that here you are now following your heart, if you will, or your mind. But now your mind, you're trying to keep it focused on one thing. And then comes this whole chapter that we are going into, where he is going to talk about this unmanifest Brahman, or what Buddhism would call as nothingness. And he says that he who has a desireless content, right? That's the criteria that Krishna puts in number 13, saying that after you go from 1 to 6 and 7 through 12 and all of that stuff for eternity of a lifetime, or it might be a day. It's different for everybody. You come to this stage where, you are clean, and there's no more desire left in you. And desire typically here has a negative connotation, in the sense that, you kind of associate your happiness or sorrow because of this object out there in the world. And that is what desire means here. Unfortunately, there's no good replacement word for what it means in Hindi or in Sanskrit. So that's your preparation to go into this. Yeah, I mean, when you come to chapter 13, sometimes I myself, I'm definitely not an expert in chapter 1 through 12. I try it, we all are trying. And it might feel a little beyond me at times to kind of talk about all this stuff, because it is, what we are trying to do is we are trying to understand this unknown with these really inefficient words and understanding that we have. But the idea is that when you want to learn something, it really needs to be converted into this deeper inner requirement. Like, almost like, if I don't understand this, it's going to be a life or death situation, in a way. So you come to that, for example, like physics, if somebody wants to go into physics and excel in college, he really wants to do it. She really wants to do it. Only then is she going to be succeeding. Not because, most of the time people float around in the life and, they do it because they're going to get these accolades and all that stuff. And I don't think they turn out to be the most successful people, right? Successful people unknowingly are doing it because there is this inner drive that has brought them to that particular action. So the listening part initially, and then the seeing for oneself in a way, has brought you to this inner want to learn, who is this person within me, wanting to see, wanting to listen, right? Knowing where is that happening, right? A long time ago, we did this Kathopanishad, where this young kid goes to Lord of Death, and he asks him, what is the real happiness, like all that stuff. So that is the anahata, meaning an inner voice, inner call, if you will, without this kind of like, when we hear something, there's two parties, right? Where somebody says something and we're hearing. So it's kind of like an ahat, meaning it's two things coming together and you can hear the noise, right? So a lot of our interaction is kind of an ahat in a way. It's a noise. It's a noise that comes from two objects hitting each other. But this inner voice, really, there's no other object. It's just you. So anahat means, one of the things that in Zen they talk about, a clap with only one hand, right? So that clap with one hand is this, in a way, like it's a deeper requirement for you to understand this for yourself, right? So, one of the things that I have said many times in this whole conversation, one way to read Gita is to really just bucketize in the sense that Krishna is this God and we are just this common people. Whatever Krishna says goes, and I'm just going to be a devotee and all that stuff. So that's an unfortunate outcome of the poetry. But to me, blessed Lord, whenever they say blessed Lord, it really means an inner voice, a deeper inner voice. When you have quietened your mind down and you can listen, now you can actually listen because you have the answer. I mean, Socrates said, right? It really says it's all about remembering. You need to calm yourself down and let your inner voice guide you. And that is what the whole book refers to as the Blessed Lord. It just so happens that Krishna already has that deeper inner connection. So he must be explaining that to Arjuna. We don't know, but it might just be Arjuna talking to himself for all we know. And one way to read the Gita is to read as if you are Arjuna, the whole thing. The other way to read Gita is you are reading as if you're the Lord. And then, Arjuna is trying to talk to you. So that's another way of looking at the whole Gita. And it just gives you a different way of understanding that. So we talked about this. And then here he tries to break this into two different domains, if you will, right? One is the field, kṣhetra, or this is everything that is non-soul related, non-atman related. Soul is not the right word, but I don't have any other better word. It's kind of like self is another interpretation. So whatever is non-self, in the sense that this body, the hands, this computer, everything that is out there, everything that you say, I know this, so whenever you can put that in that sentence, it's outside of this I, right? Um, so one Swami kind of gives this really interesting interpretation of how to interpret this body, right? This body that we have, we try to want to stay very, very connected to this body. This is the twam that I talked about, you, right? Me, in a way. So one way to look at this, I mean, I just don't know what the right English translation here is, but yeah, I'm doing a very poor translation here. But one way to look at whenever I'm talking about my own body, I want to disassociate myself from body. So I want to have this understanding that I am something better. I am pure. I'm detached from this. So what is going to help me from detaching myself from the body, or, then it extends to everything past the body as well, is understanding that this is continuously getting destroyed. It is just deteriorating over time. And obviously, yeah, we have all kinds of garbage in our body as well. So this kind of an understanding of the body where you realize that, man, I am 80 years old, but I can still understand this deeper. So there's somebody out in there that is understanding this. It doesn't matter, like my face is gone and my body is gone and all that stuff. So it is this separation that you're trying to create when you're talking about your own body. But there's also another person there, right? So you might be looking at another human being. And now you're switching this whole body. You don't say that your body is filth. The idea is that body, you can see that body as a temple. And you can see that there is a God there, in a way. God in the sense that there's somebody who is knowing. This whole notion of knowing is what is going to be stressed in the next 7 chapter, and appreciating the fact, knowing nothing in specific, because that knowing is very mundane, according to the book, right? Just the notion of knowing, like experience, not the experience says, but the idea that we can experience something. Why can we do that, right? So that is what they're trying to get to. So the aham and idam is another Sanskrit word that phraseology that comes in the book. Is you want to separate from the field, which is I am not this, right? I am not this finger. I am not this body. I'm not this voice. I'm not this, right? Because there's somebody who can say, I am talking. So the moment you have that phraseology, suddenly there's some knower that we don't know much about. Um, um, so all these connections that we have out there in the field, they derive from some kind of a relation, right? I have a relation to my family, I have a relation to my husband, wife, or house, and all that stuff, right? So those relations exist. And when it comes to I, just I in quotes, that I is isolated. And that isolated I is the same in you, me, and everybody, every intelligent person, every human being, not just intelligent, but every human being. And that deeper understanding of there is this I in you and I in me is just this one massive, or not massive, but one common thing between us, right? So it kind of brings us all together. Um, and no relation can block this understanding. Then the book has all this kind of very poetic interpretation of how whenever you're focused on the field where everything is relation driven, you're in this cycle of rebirth. Now, the cycle of rebirth has a lot of deeper understanding. Nobody knows, right? Given our lifetime, we don't know what rebirth means. We have this notion of rebirth meaning that the same body is going to come back and then we are going to call it rebirth. No, I mean, it could be anything for all we care. But rebirth from our point of view here, from philosophical point of view, I would say has to do with we go through these cycles of joy and sorrow through our lives uh, umpteen number of times without even realizing that you've been here in the past, and you don't learn anything from that, and you continuously keep doing those same mistakes again and again, and you regret the same way. So life repeats itself, we say. History repeats itself, we say, right? So that part is the rebirth that is happening through us in this lifetime, and how can we use that to wake us up, right? Um, so so yeah, the field is all of that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of the actual word itself, kṣhetra, has so many deeper understandings about it, and then the body, which is the sharira, in our language, has a deeper understanding. And the key takeaway from the first two lines, we're really just only in two lines in this chapter, same, knower, and all, right? And one of the things is you cannot describe it. Why can't you describe it? The moment you can describe something, mark that as field. Because you're describing using these senses, these eyes. It's all limited, right? You're in a limited structure and you are talking about something. The moment you are talking about something, that means that is part of the field, right? But there is something that is, I know that I'm knowing, right? That knowing part is something that we don't know why we know anything, right? And that's what they are talking about, which is that is the knower. And that knower that is understanding, that is the most ultimate thing. And it is also impossible to understand that, right? So it's a bit of a dichotomy here in the sense that we want to understand it, but it is also impossible to understand it. It's kind of like I keep going back to that book that I mentioned a few sessions ago in another lecture. What is that book, Jason? I keep forgetting that book. The one where it's about the two-dimensional and the line thing. The Flatlanders, I guess, right? The Flatlanders or something. Uh,
Uh, er, er, um, uh, yeah,
I think Yeah, it'll come to me. It'll come to me. I forget, but I love that book because there it is basically it's about these two-dimensional people who are trying to understand somebody who comes from three dimensions, and he's telling them that there is a sphere. And they are all mocking him. It's like, what sphere? Everything is a circle or a square or a rectangle. That's it, right? So we don't know this other dimension that is allowing us to know, right? Um, so we kind of at this point become sort of speechless at that point, right? Um, yeah, so we are going to keep pushing further here. Yeah, so this one, let's just see if I have put any animations here at all. No, I have not. That sucks, because these words can be very distracting. So try to avoid reading my slides. So just listen to me. The field is sort of like a body limited life. They call it as Prakriti, and it has Vikriti. Prakriti is a understanding, one way to understand that is like pre-creation, in a way where there was something where creation comes out of it, right? So that is that original, unspoiled thing. And then imperfections brings about the whole life. I mean, if you look at what our scientists say about our universe, how it came about in the Big Bang and all that stuff, it was one imperfection that led to this whole cycle of events. And here we are on this planet, right? So it's all series of imperfections. Here, what the Indian philosophers are doing is that they are trying to understand this inner notion, not the outside notion. So West has spent a lot of time to understand this physical world. Here, the Hindu philosophers, they are trying to understand the inner world. Um, so um, the one of the Swami kind of explains this way, right? He says, let's say you are deeply asleep, right? And now you wake up. So you wake up and immediately you realize, oh, this is my body. Or, in some cases in the morning, oh my God, my back is hurting now suddenly. But the whole time when you were in deep asleep, body was not hurting, right? You were completely forgotten about everything. So that is that pure self, right? That is that prakriti. And then when you wake up, now the body has come to existence in a way. Now the pain has come to existence, right? And then you suddenly realize, oh my God, my body is hurting. I am aware. So there's this awareness comes about, like that lower back is my back and it is hurting. And then you realize the world around you, I have the patio door, or somebody else is sleeping on my side or whatnot, right? So you now realize there is this other, and then there is this me. And now you're even more awake, and suddenly all the thoughts start hitting you, and the feelings have come to you, and you are now like trying to follow these feelings, and they will define your entire wakeful life. They will drive you to do whatever you want to do, and they're also part of your destruction in a way. Your daily destruction. And what gives us that notion of continuity, or the solidity, if you will, is this body. This body that we have. Daily we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, oh, I exist. And so one way they put is that prakriti, when something comes out of it, uh, as a sort of an imperfection, right? All of these things that come out are imperfections. So it's kind of like, one example they give is um, like our kid who is born through us is sort of like a distorted version of me in a way. Uh, and that cycle continues. So intelligence comes out of this, ego comes out of it. And then there is this notion of the senses, right? So senses is something that we immediately can, there's my nose, but there is something in there called as the tanmatra, that is that original, like sort of like it's hard to even mention that, right? What makes us want to smell, right? Or what gives us that feeling that this is smelling like rose, right? So there is that deeper, and that is that consciousness or the unknown, right? And then there are these, the senses itself are broken into like three different things, which is one is action, means I'm voicing out things. These are my action senses that I'm using, and you guys are listening. So you're using the intelligent senses to listen and understand what is coming out of my mouth. And then there is these grosser elements, which is, it could be this camera, or you could be looking at my picture and all of that. So one of the things they say in this is all these three are feeding on each other: the action sense, intelligence, and also the gross element. So this is one way of looking at creation from the sense of a soul experience, if you will, or the self experience from an inner world point of view. This world is only real because I can interpret the world. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, if I don't exist, this world really doesn't matter for me, right? So once you have all of these abilities, one of the key nature that we have is, we have desires and aversions, and then we have pleasure and pain. Now, so these are the four qualities he calls out in one of the sentences. And then we have this so-called consciousness. This consciousness here is different from the Brahman, or the consciousness, the larger consciousness that kind of governs this whole creation, if you will, right? But here, this consciousness is something that we are conscious about, right? I'm conscious that I'm talking to you, and I'm conscious that it's a bit cold here, or the weather is like this, and I'm conscious that I'm speaking in English, and I'm conscious that you're listening, right? So there's something that I know, right? I can see, I can appreciate this consciousness, and I think to some extent, when they talk about AI and artificial intelligence, and consciousness being given to them, I think that the consciousness that they're talking about is something that we already can do, right? So it's kind of creating this level of a machine, but that's a machine. It has been programmed by somebody. But if you look at ourselves, right, despite this whole body, it has been changing every day for our entire lives. But there is something, right? We can't explain that something where, we can actually appreciate a rose. We can appreciate a sunrise or sunset, or we get miserably sad, when a divorce is happening or whatnot, right? So there is some involuntary thing that happens within us that we can't explain. And will a machine go through that? Probably not. Now, this co-location is something, somehow all of our hands and body and everything is kind of situated nicely. And there is a persisting force, if you will, that keeps all of us together. And we kind of feel like this body is me, right? So we start owning this. And that can be then extended to the house and cars and wives and husbands and kids and all of that stuff, right? So we start that consistency that we see, we start thinking of them as this defines me. And that is what we need, he is trying to tell us is that, how can we avoid that, right? That attachment is what we want to get away from, which happens to be also the Buddha's teaching, right? So one of the things that this desire aversion that leads to pleasure and pain, one of the Swami kind of goes through this exercise and he says, let's say you did not know that you have won a lottery. And you don't know, in your bank account, suddenly there is a few million extra dollars there. And you have not seen your bank account, and you are going about your way in life. Would you actually feel the pain, pleasure? Until you see that, nothing, right? Nothing happens to you just because somebody has put this amount of money in your bank. So the pleasure that we get is when we know whatever we wanted, we got it, right? So this is a deeper understanding in the sense that, yes, it sounds like a very mundane statement, a very common statement, but I think what it is trying to say is, if we did not know, so focus is on the know, right? The knowing part. And the knowing part is something that I can appreciate that, and I can be happy about it only when I know it, that has happened in my life. But if I had not known about it, Same thing applies to, like, let's say my hand has gone numb and I have no feeling in my fingers. And let's say somebody pierces it. I will not notice the pain. I will not know that there's pain here in my arm, right? So ultimately, it comes down to how it is registered in my mind. And you know, so sorry, I think, yeah, some of the English here is terrible. But the idea is that there is something that happens in our mind which we can associate it as a pleasure. And, you know, our mind kind of quietens down when we have achieved what we were set out to achieve. And we think that achievement is giving us the happiness, but really it's the calming of the mind that has given us the happiness. So the idea is for us to kind of disassociate our day-to-day pain and pleasure from the outward things. So understand, like, you know, how is that outward thing manifesting within me? The manifestation is in the sense that, you know, what a relief, you know, it's like the mind kind of feels calm and there's a euphoria in your mind and all that stuff. So something is going on in your mind that makes you feel like ecstatic and joyful. And let's say that doesn't happen, what you wanted to happen out there. Your mind is like, oh, why the heck, you know, this did not happen and all that. So you're disturbed. So the disturbed mind causes you pain. So it is not associated with things out there. So it is associated with the mind fluttering. Okay, so if we understand that properly, now what we can say is, regardless of what happens out there, can I keep my mind quiet? Right? Now, suddenly what happens is the field is not having an impact on me. It's kind of like the puddle or the rose not having impact on the sun. Sun shines regardless, right? So it is not impacting. So that impactless existence through your life is the sort of like we are manifesting God. Now, these are all poetic languages to explain some really larger concept in life, because, you know, for the longest period of our time, you know, something that is beyond us, we try to associate that with God, or in our world, we try to associate that with Marvel and DC comics, you know, with Superman and Batman and all that stuff. So, so, uh, so that could be one way of looking at superpowers, right? You know, somebody has a superpower, but this controlling your mind, not in the sense that I'm going to force my mind. No, just an easy, like, oh, that happened. I won a Nobel Prize. Okay, no problem. And I lost my house. No problem. You know, tomorrow is going to be here. I'm here. Life is good, right? So that kind of an attitude is what you are trying to shoot for. Um, so this is an interesting exercise that, um, you know, actually, I think J. Krishnamurti also goes through this, which is, what is this? Like when we ask anybody, like, who are you? Explain. What immediately happens is we go to our past and we talk about, like, you know, where we lived and, you know, what age. Some might be easy enough to say how old you are, or, you know, my father's this and all that stuff. So it's very much associated with time, space, and memories, right? So so field understanding is to develop a healthy distance, right? So we talked about that. And so this whole notion of associating this I with physical space and time that is continuously changing, that is called as agyan. Agyan is ignorance. uh, so the true understanding is that this journey goes beyond just collecting all these different accolades, or even, like, you know, some people associate with, like, oh, you know, I understand this and I'm the best in physics, or I'm the best in electronics, or whatnot, right? So the true understanding is the understanding of understanding, if you will, right? So that is that jnana, right? That is the knowledge that this seven chapters, I know the next six chapters are supposed to focus on. Um, um, so yeah, I mean, this could be an interesting exercise about thoughts, right? J. Krishnamurti talks about this. Is a bit of a digression from this, but I thought it was a great idea. Is this notion of after death, like what is going to happen? People are curious about this after death. So he says, like, hey, so why do you? So somebody asks him, like, why do you? No, what happens after death? Like, do you know? You're such a knowledgeable person. And so he says, yeah, let's talk about that. What is after death? And then he goes into this whole thing, like, why is this human innate want to know what is after death? And then he brings it to like the notion of thought process, which he says that we are either afraid of after death or we are very happy about after death. Right? Some people say there is this heaven and something amazing is going to happen out there. So he's saying when we have this notion of after death, we're missing today. So the idea is not so much about after death. He says, let's change the equation to before death. So what have we done about this before death? So this thought process always wants us to live in future. The future doesn't exist. The now is all that exists. So the whole notion of rebirth and the death, it's quite a grand scheme that religion has wanted us to think about so that they can manipulate us and stay fearful of death constantly throughout our life. And then, most of our angers and fears, if you really look at the deeper level of why that happens, it is really this fear of something getting taken away from us, which is what death is going to do. Death is going to make you just drop off everything. So what Krishna or even Krishnamurti says is that, okay, well, why not practice it now? Like, I gave you that example of earlier about the lottery winning and what happens to your mind. Well, the calmness of the mind is the key. So it doesn't matter if you won the lottery or you lost your house. So both of those were sort of like attaching us to something. So let's say you die, then that death is going to take that away from you anyways. Okay, great. So while you're living, can you detach from those things? Because ultimately, that is what eventually is going to make you not worry about death so much, which is going to steal it away from you anyways, right? So now suddenly you have become immortal in the sense that death should not affect you. So in the sense that what is that effect that death is having on you is it is going to take away all these attachments from you. And that is what you will miss as part of your dying experience. And this is ultimately the liberation, right? This is the if you look at the 4 paths of or 8 paths of what Buddha talks about, life is suffering and how I can fix that. Or this whole Gita is about moksha or liberation. What does liberation mean? Liberation doesn't mean anything where there's heaven and some amazing thing is going to happen out there. No, liberation is now here, and how can you interpret that? Um, so another key piece that I want to highlight in this chapter 13 is this section in the middle from 8 to 12, where he kind of covers these 20 different qualities that you can watch in yourself. When that happens, you are immediately attaching yourself to the field. And why is it beneficial for you to stay detached, right? So the first one he talks about is now in Sanskrit, there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but I'm trying to do a very, very poor job here. So 20 items that block finding that one knower, kṣhetrajña, in all. In all, right? Obviously, you want to see that in all. It's not just seeing within you, but seeing it in all is the key, right? Watch within for this, and not for the others, right? In a way that you're not like sitting and judging the other person. Is he focused on the field? We don't want to do that. That's not the point. The point is looking at yourself. Like, is there some kind of a subtle braggery going on, right? From the point of name, form, role, role, age, and race, when you're viewing others or a self, the subtle braggeries can come from so many different things, right? That, hey, oh, I don't watch TV because, it will spoil my brain, while when you're saying that, the other person who's watching TV, you're kind of putting them down. And somehow you have associated, now it becomes your own ego that you have kind of highlighted there. And that watching in that action, while that is happening, uh-oh, what am I saying here? So that should correct you to bring yourself towards the self, right? Sometimes the charity becomes about showing off, right? Or there's also this whole notion of like, hey, I'm collecting so much knowledge, I'm reading so much, so I must be something great. And um, and then, there is also another thing that is going on in our society all the time, is that many people are depressed, and many people, and they, some of them are for right reasons, but one of the ailments of our society today happens to be, and probably it has always been there, but it has gotten worse because of the social media, is this attention economy, right? We are always seeking attention. And in fact, these big companies are banking on that, right? So they're giving you all these tools so that they can make money off of your attention-seeking nature, right? So one of the things that we tend to do is constantly talk about our ailments, our sadness and depression, and repeat that story to ourselves that, there's something depressing going on in my life. And what that makes us do is like really feel important. And that's another thing. He then talks about violence. Violence can happen not just physically, but also just emotionally and subtle ways when you are doing something out of spite or love even, right? There is a certain chain of violence that you're creating. And this can happen through body, physically you're hurting somebody, through speech, but even just mind. Even let's say you're not involved with anybody, but some thoughts are coming to your mind, right? Those will subtly control some of your actions in the world. And that can lead to some massive issues on the planet, if you will. And I can keep talking about this in the sense that if you look at all kinds of crazy crises going on around constantly, right, in humanity, and also the planet damage and all of that stuff, is all related to these very benign seeming, not physically hurting anybody type of a thought process that most of us go through. Holding grudges, crookedness, physically, mentally, even the speech wise. And then, this is key, right? Non-learning attitude. Like if you, anytime, whatever is happening on the planet, in any engagement that you're having, any conversation you're having with anybody, it's not about judging that other person, but taking away something to cleanse yourself. Like your notion of like, oh, this particular situation is making me angry, my mind is fluttering, and well, how can I keep my mind calm while I engage with this, right? So that there is this, when you don't have this learning attitude, it will cause all kinds of problems. Non-serving, so one is learning, right? Well, learning is one thing, but then there's non-serving really. One good way of interpreting, one of the Swami talks about it is, it's not about serving just because you want to be kind, because that is going to be, again, feeding your ego. Serving means that whatever you have learned, you're now implementing it through your life. When you read something in the book, you are actually reading it because you want to change yourself, right? And now you are serving the planet unknowingly, right? So you're doing something good when you are fixing yourself in a way. And then, just the whole filthy thing. He just talks about just the dirt and all that stuff. One is the physical part, the other is the mental part. That is also something of a thing that, again, is kind of egoistic in a way. Then there is this getting too excited immediately, or getting too angry, getting too happy or too sad too quickly, a lack of control over your mind. Yet, what happens is people in power will want to control other people. And, there's a lot of the gurus, and, I'm definitely not a guru, but I'm talking about all these very high ideas, but I struggle myself with anger and fear. So working on that. Um, um, yeah. So then he goes on. There is also this notion of seeking satisfaction through these senses, right? So this is where you feel like, if I do something, or if I get that new Tesla, or if I get that other thing, that's how I'm going to be satisfied, right? That is going to keep you away from the knower. I am ego. So here, Um, so I is okay. But what happens is it goes into I am ego, in the sense that this comes from all the desires and everything, and you associate with that ego. And that is where the problem is. But if you go back to I, that is, in a way, it is unaffected, it is pure. But the moment these extra things attach, and then you forget about this I, and this becomes the I. And that's the point here, right? So you have pulled yourself away from yourself. And one of the names for God is Aham. That is the I, right? That is within us. So there's interesting interpretation of Aham and all of that stuff, when you break it out in Sanskrit. So then there is also, like, a lot of people just waste our time in uh, body issues, right? Like, oh, continuously feeling worried and down about some illness. Yes, there is illness, and you have to take your medicine and all of that stuff, and there's issues going on with the body. But if you distance yourself a little bit while the medicine is fixing itself, you are keeping your calm and that happy, uh, stable mental composure, if you will. Has so many ways, effects, right? One is it's reducing your stress, and it might even help fix the ailment. But what happens is, many a times, we are constantly kind of like talking about our body ailments, and that talking also, much like what it does with depression, is probably is aggravating that pain. And so there is this notion of asakti. This is the word that comes in Gandhi's whole interpretation of Gita as well. Those are the two books that we are reading, right? Gandhi's and Aurobindo's. So he stresses on this a lot. The attachment comes in two ways. One is, I own this, like, my kid. The other one is, I belong to something, right? So this whole thing is attachment. And that is the part that is, remember, we talked about the experience of death, is that this is going to be breaking. So why not prepare for that now? Not that you have to run away from these relations. You have to very much be in those relations, but understand that, you don't want to be depending on those too much. Because then what happens is, those are the ones that start controlling your happiness and sadness. Um, so yeah, this is kind of repeating the same thing, I guess, up here. Constant focus on physical. Oh yeah, you know, a lot of us, I tend to go to the gym all the time. So one of the things he says is, when you have too much focus on that, just the body, and eating really good stuff to keep yourself physically healthy and obsessed by it, right? That is also kind of taking you away from your true nature. That doesn't mean you got to eat unhealthy things. The point is that there should be a good balance. Um, Um, and then, some of us are busy doing this where, God is somewhere far out there, right? And I'm going to pray in these 15 minutes that I will do. Now, remember, this book was written when there was a lot of people who followed God and all that stuff. So you can think about this in so many ways. We put things on pedestal, and once we put it on pedestal, somehow we feel like we have achieved that, or we are respectful of that. So we must be good, so that is the part where, like with Buddha's teaching or any philosophies that you learn or whatnot, right? Once you learn, if that thing just goes on the rack on the bookcase or whatnot, and then you feel good that you've finished that book, that's a problem, in the sense that that is going to build your ego. So you are living here versus here, right? Instead of you're living in the ego in that situation. This adulterated devotion comes across clearly in one of the lines where he says about um, adulterated devotion means that your mind is constantly like wavering between, let's say, two good ideas, like this or this or this or that. And so you're not following the path or whatnot in its truest sense. So you're not getting any benefits out of it. So that's where, you want to inculcate a bit of a patience, inner patience with something that you're doing. And you do that dedicatedly, 100%. And whatever you're doing 100%, be it your work or be it talking with your wife or husband or whatnot, right? In all of these interactions, 100% is the key, so that unadulterated, um, uh, I mean, devotion is a strong word, but this concentration to this active listening, let's say, and he's staying with, oh yeah, this is also another big thing with our society, right? We are constantly seeking for a group. We can't, we are very, we have lost the ability to, we get bored very quickly. So we have Netflix and we have so many avenues to kind of run away from us. So the idea is Gita is all about running inwards, but we find all the avenues to run away from ourselves. And that is a problem, right? There is this, he actually calls this out where, there's too much involvement with worldly matters. What does too much involvement mean? A lot of the time, if you've lately, a lot of the social dinners, at least the ones that I'm having, what happens is invariably it's about politics. And you get this really angry vitriol around the dinner table, and then you get pulled into that conversation, and then you're saying all kinds of crazy things. None of the people on the table can really act upon anything, and you are creating all kinds of anger. You go back home with that anger and fear, and we just feeding on that anger and fear. So apparently that was a problem back then too. So nothing new. So all he's saying is that you can't fix the world. If you want to, go ahead with it. Nobody's going to stop you. But really, the focus should be fixing you. Because if we all fixed ourselves, the world might be a better place. In fact, that's what Aurobindo was trying to do. Aurobindo and Gandhi, those two books that we are reading, they are coming from the same genre in the sense that they are trying to fight the Britishers who attacked India. And Gandhi took one path, which is the nonviolent path, and he became very famous for that. And obviously, I think a lot of our freedom is a kind of thanks to Gandhi, I guess. But Aurobindo, really, he said, is it really enough to push the Britishers out from this country? Is that really true human beings that we are creating? So he really was trying to strive for something higher, which is an integrated human being, and not just an Indian, but a better person on the society, right? So he kind of completely diverged from the independence movement, and then, people started losing some of the ideas that he was trying to express, but they are very philosophically deeper ideas. And, what we are doing right now is satsang, which is we are existing together, we are sharing ideas, and sometimes we are too involved in these outwardly things, maybe binge watching on Netflix or whatnot, right? So that is that lack of satsang where, you know, sat is existence, sang means togetherness, together existing, in the sense that we are questioning existence and we are coming together. And these few minutes that we are together, we can appreciate, be it because of the book, we can appreciate the other's existence in a way, right? So in India, there is this notion of people go meet for satsang. Now, they mean something entirely different. Satsang becomes about God and singing hymns and all that stuff. While that is good, but they completely lose the essence of like, hey, we are here to see the other human as God, uh, you know, uh, as a God, basically, right? So yeah, these are the 20 things that I thought were kind of interesting to observe ourselves as we go about in life. Um, and then, he kind of switches gear and talks about the knower. And the idea of knower is that you cannot really know this thing. I can understand and you are understanding, but what is this understanding itself, right? So why do we understand anything? So that is the deeper thing that he calls it as, that is the only thing that is worth knowing. Once we can, the whole idea is that we spend too much time on a lot of mundane things, and sometimes they can be disturbing and they can be hurting us, all of us, or they can be pleasureful, but they don't last longer. So the idea is you still do that, but come from it from a higher perspective. So you don't lose the perspective in this mundaneness or the common thing out there. Yeah. So, um, yeah, I think there's a connection to the story of Simba, but maybe we can get to that eventually later on. So sometimes this, when we are constantly attached to these little things in the world, we can forget the vastness that is deeply buried within us. And that is the part that we want to get to, right? And in these next few chapters. Um, yeah, so uh, yeah, there's some interesting things that happens past that 19 and stuff like that. But yeah. Um, oh yeah, this is an interesting notion. He talks about lights. I am the lighter of light and darkness. So I mean, I can shine light on both the things, like, we are, our eye cannot quite see darkness, but our eye can detect that there's darkness, there's no light, right? So it's as if something is making us aware that there's darkness and then there's light. That something is that higher self, right? So it's as if, the higher self's brightness is so brighter than your common brightness that you see from sun. So through these little eyes that we have been given, we can understand when it is bright, and we can understand when there is no light, right? So he is going through these different levels of like, where can you see me? Where can you see the knower? So he goes through a series of things. So one of the things he talks about is the light. Oh yeah, he talks about, yeah, this verse 15 is kind of interesting. That's why I have this here. Um, yeah, so from the so there are lots of experiences that we are going in through life, right? But the notion of us experiencing these experiences is itself marvelous, right? We can experience something. So taking that marvel, when you see that that is the knower, he says, that's the knower. So it's an indirect thing, we don't know what it is. Why do we even experience something that we experience? But he says that that's one way to understand this knower. So there is the outside and inside, we kind of divide boundaries through our rooms and houses, anything out there is out there and in here is in here. But he says that outside, inside is the same, that's, you have created that boundary based on the physical reality, but it's the same thing. And then there is, he talks about far and near, he says, I am far and I am near. Now, when he says I, really, he's talking about the I within all of us, right? That we have gone so far away from I because of the ego and all that stuff that we talked about. To get back here, it just seems like a very, very torturous journey. Or it can just be very close, right? So he says, I am either, it's up to you, I'm either very, very far away from you, or I'm very, very close to you, right? So that's one of the things that he talks about. And then there is, we did talk about the gunas, right? The sattvic and rajas and, all of that stuff, the three properties, the three fundamental properties in the universe that Sankhya logic talks about. And we kind of touched upon it multiple times. So one is rajas means something that pushes us into action. Tamas means something that recoils from action, it's a lazy thing. And sattvic is kind of balanced, right? So there are these three different types of things in every day in life, right? So guna properties are something that if you start looking at a house, a brick, a piece of sand, and even smaller thing, right? What happens is the so-called properties start reducing. So the smaller something gets, the subtle it gets, it is defined by lesser number of properties. So God itself, or this knower that he's talking about, he says, has no properties. So that's why, from our perspective, we can't really understand that. There's no property per se there. And so yeah, that whole thing, he's again trying to point to like how can you, he gives different examples there along the way. What else? Yeah, there's this interesting thing about the sensor, the knowledge, the knower and the field, right? So there is a knower, the Purusha, or the person, that whole notion of knowing. And then there is this whole vast world that is in front of us, this body and everything. I mean, this is really, we as a human being are where, one way to look at it is God and the world meets. So it's a way to appreciate this life so that we can, bring about sort of a quality of God in our day-to-day living in a way, right? We kind of forget that because we take all of this for granted, the ability to know and ability to experience. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, here I kind of shortened it down a little bit, those 20 qualities. I thought those were kind of interesting. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, yeah, we have a few more minutes, and I'll just open up the floor to discuss more if you guys have any questions. Oh yeah, Flatland by Edwin Abbott. That's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent presentation. I really do.
Mm.
As you go through it, you
Mm.
can see the depth and level by which you understand it. So I very, very much appreciate it. Just a few things that maybe there was so much that was covered, kind of I was wondering actually if you could maybe compare and contrast, because you said once something is spoken, that it is automatically becomes part of the physical realm. And so therefore, how does that compare to the idea of Taoism? The eternal Tao cannot be spoken.
Ah, yes,
So
yes, yes.
what's the relationship between those two? And then in a way, there is an element of in Christianity as well. I mean, even that the incomprehensible, the
Mm,
idea that certain things cannot be comprehended,
correct.
so that there is this kind of theme that exists within all three.
Hmm.
Uh, and even you're talking about how we um, create boundaries with language, or no boundaries, period,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Obviously, that's something that is done with language.
hmm.
The minute that there is something that is spoken, I guess it's
You put walls around it. Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah,
you have
no,
any,
sorry, go ahead.
no, do you have any thoughts on that in
Yeah,
particular?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't understand Taoism at the level of what you guys have gone through this. Thanks to Jason putting all those classes together. But I have read a little bit about it, and yes, I had that same moment as I was reading this. Is yes, like the person who has that understanding, he comes to a point where he becomes speechless, he or she, and that speechlessness is hard to convey other than saying that the moment you say it, you lose it. You know, it's not because they want to hide, it's because that it's really not explainable. One has to go through that journey oneself. And in fact, that's what Buddha has always said, is that, don't ever blindly follow me. That's one of the side effect of all these religions, is that when we look at a concept and something comes across as very esoteric or something really deep, we gravitate towards it just because it is deep, rather than embodying it in the sense that, this is interesting. How does it apply for me? I don't want to blindly follow Buddha for no reason. I want to be Buddha, like that needs to be like, I want to be Jesus. I want to be Muhammad. I want to be Krishna, right? That needs to be the journey, not so much that, hey, I will understand what Buddha is saying and I'm going to spend my 100% of the time on what he's saying. I'm going to become a PhD in this, right? Um, that is, in effect, it's a sort of a waste of time, but it is not. And what I mean by that is that journey is something that Buddha also did, right? He went through a lot of like understanding, interpreting all these texts and all that. But ultimately he got tired, and then he had an awakening of himself, right? And I think hopefully as we are going through life, we come to a point in our lives where we realize, and everything kind of humbles us, and we feel a certain joy in life, not kind of like the pleasure and pain that we talked about, but there's a certain, like, we can appreciate, like, and we find everything just blissful, and you can't explain to others why you're finding it blissful, right? And to me, that's the Tao. That's the way, right? And that's what Krishna is trying to get to, I think. Yeah.
I appreciate that. May I ask another question?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody raising hands.
And somebody else has something.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the major things that you really, really hit upon that was is that something being done through you
Mm,
versus obviously that I am doing it.
right.
Um, and the reason why I think that that is such a critical um, understanding
Mm.
uh, is that then that kind of leads to the idea of detachment,
Yes.
in the sense that once you're able to understand that something is being done through you,
Mm.
that the the experiences, the objects that decay, that themselves, that they in and of themselves are not meaningful, and that it is rather more or less the action and not the outcome.
Yes.
So understanding that is understanding something bigger than yourself. And I think that that is that's essential to virtue.
In a way. Yeah, I think we have a very immediately when you utter that word virtue, there's all these things that pop up in your head, right?
It depends on the term, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it depends on what your upbringing has been. But you're right. I mean, virtue really is this a deeper understanding of the action that you're doing and turning off the ego, and whatever comes out of you at that point is a virtue. Now somebody who does not understand this, that's, I go back to the example of a samurai warrior, right? He's a fighter. He's going to kill you. He's going to chop you. Now, the killing and chopping part might come across as a violent and horrible action and vice and all that stuff. But there is a certain value to understand the teachings of samurai. And, virtue by itself is not the ethical understanding of how we understand so-called societal living or civilized living. It's more about, at least from Gita's point of view and how you explained it, it's more about the action comes out not as a I am doing it, but it is happening. And when that happens, you're not acting out of spite or fear. And that itself is a virtue. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think that I mean is a very important point. Because especially when you think about it in terms of, yeah, your direct relationship to the ego, I did it, I did it for this. And then as opposed to actually, you're not even able to ask the question as to why it was done in the first place. And that's the much deeper level of understanding that that exists. And I mean, there was a lot. I mean, I also think that the obsession that you talked about was also very important, in the sense that when we become obsessed with things, well, actually, let me back that up, because there's something else that I want to just run back by you really quickly. Somebody in Stoicism, somebody told me, we were talking last week how the word desire is maybe not translated, and you just mentioned it, how it's not translated actually ideally from Sanskrit. Some people might suggest using the term value. Yeah. Is there anything that would suggest value as opposed to desire in Sanskrit? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the Sanskrit word is ichha, and it is, to really put it in multiple words, is like, ichha means I want to do this because of this, like, and I don't know what is the
I
proper.
think that's value. I mean, to be quite honest, I want to do this because of this.
Right.
Therefore, that is what the core value is.
Right.
So,
I think you're right. Yeah, from that sense, yes, that kind of makes sense. So you are attaching some notion of this value. It's really cool that you brought that up, because I think we measure things, right? Return of whatever you're trying to do. And that is that value that you're going to get out of doing something. I do this because of this. So that metrics is something that we have defined. Let's say we never had numbers, then what? So what is it worth $1 million, or is it worth $10? We don't know. So the notion of metrics and measurements, the word matra is another word in Hindi, and then Maya. So Maya, which is the hypnosis, the hypnotism, the hypnotic lifestyle that we live, is all based around these numeric metrics that we have defined, and we associate success and all of that stuff, fear and all of that stuff, to those numbers. But it is all made up. It's all made up, and that is that hypnotic, and that Maya and metrics kind of go very close to each other, and that is the part. If your desire and if your happiness is associated with a certain number, that is changing every day. What was $1,000 back then, today has a different notion, different understanding of $1,000. So yeah, I think that's interesting.
I mean, I just think of it because when I think of value, I
Mhm.
think of what we were just talking about with the idea of why.
Mhm.
So because of the reason
Because of,
you're doing
right.
it. So I'm doing it because of, that it's part of something not bigger than myself. That's, and therefore I
Mhm.
have a value, and that enables other things to be practiced, like to temper my desires
Mhm.
because I have a value.
So yes, so yeah, I mentioned of this
So
saint,
that's a consciousness thing almost.
Ramakrishnan, right? Ramakrishnan, I think, yeah. So he was like, he was not a learned man, but he was quite reached as Buddha, right? Um, so he basically said that there is only one desire that we need to have, is the desire of God. Now that can mean so many things. It's not like he doesn't mean physical God, but the whole one-pointedness, right? And that desire, he said that there are some good desires and then there's bad desires. There's only one good desire, he says. And so, yeah, I guess having this notion of a value system in your life that takes you away from the field and brings it back to your growth, inner growth, is okay, right? I mean, that's a better way to interpret this whole value discussion, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's what it means to be self-aware,
Mhm.
because then there are these other practices that you can start to put into place as to, uh, pursuing even what right action is.
Mhm.
From there is all based on that
Mhm.
understanding.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean, it's, and that's what it is. I mean, and um, there is the understanding of the self and its relationship to the whole within that as well,
Yeah, so
if it's properly valued.
there's a great example that this Swami gives about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was one more philosopher that is worth understanding in Indian diaspora. He was a very logical person initially, and he would argue and argue to death, in the sense that he would make you lose your argument, be anything about anything. And then he eventually becomes this very highest devotee of Krishna, and then he would go around the whole Indian subcontinent singing songs, dancing on the streets and stuff like that, and people would join him, and he's known for that. And so one of the dialogues with him, and maybe it's a made up story, but it's worthwhile. He says, like, why do you do this? Do you expect that God is going to give you something great? And his response is kind of really interesting. He says, "Oh, I never really asked myself why I do this. I have no idea." Meaning that, sometimes we associate doing with that end result, but then there's this notion of just doing. And the fact that he has gone through this whole exercise of very logical thinking and argumentation, and he has come to a point where, he just is enjoying life, and he's dancing and is singing and, hymns and all that, with no goal of achieving God or any of that stuff, right? So what is the value when you do that then, right? So there's no value. There's nothing. He's just doing it, doing the action for the action's sake, in a way. Um, so anyway, so all right. Well, anybody else has anything, or we can wrap up, I guess, Jason. There's no hands
Yeah,
raised.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
And then I think I've been in your session everyone for the everything.
Yes, you have.
And
Yeah.
I do have
Because I can't conduct my session without you, Jason.
well, I that's true. Okay. Before the session, I read it. Okay. And then I listen. I think every session, Sasha is here and listen. And I do feel the change. Okay. I
Is
do
it?
feel the change of understanding because one thing I like to ask, but I don't expect you give me answer. I believe you probably don't have an answer. That probably take another 6 weeks to
Hmm.
know. It I always surprised when I read it. I think I get something, but when you summarize it, you told me the difference. I said why I didn't know this
So
when I read it, right? So
yes.
that means Sashi is much smarter than me.
No,
Oh,
no, no, no. Okay, so this is what happens, right? I think I have a lot of avenues where I'm listening to these Swamis and also J. Krishnamurti and all of that stuff. Sometimes, like you connect the thoughts in
I
the
know.
sense that, hey, I heard something from this guy. Oh my God, is this what Gita is trying to say? It's just like, ooh, a light glows on you. It's just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I try to bring some of those ideas and try to bring it in this discussion as much as possible. Sometimes it kind of feels like I'm not even covering the essence of the chapter, or not, I'm not going line by line in a way. It's hard to do that in 1 hour, but it might give you some tools to maybe do this on your own, or it's not even about Gita, right? It's all about like how can we ultimately utilize this in our own lives. So yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for observing that. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you everyone. And then I think we observe the time. It's 2 hours. And then next week, if you are interested in the learn how to play Go game. Okay, so we are going to uh actually teach you, or not me, Steve. Okay, he's a Go. I should not say master, but actually he's a devotee of playing Go's, and he's going to teach us actually how to play. If you never know how to play, or you know sort of that, that's our try. I know it's difficult, but we will try it. Yeah. And then after that, I'm going to continue on the history of Chinese philosophy. So
And a lot of these videos are available on Jason's YouTube channel. So I think if you guys are going to continue with Gita, we are so far deep away from the initial part. Sometimes it's good for you to kind of go through those initial lectures. It might help you, and you might bring some interesting ideas to the table. So it is not just me talking then.
yeah. Actually, Sashi is sometimes I review by when I'm driving. I listen.
Yeah, it's too much Shashi. Yeah, that's way too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Anyway, thank you everyone, and I hope to see you next week.
Yeah,
And bye.
thank you. Bye. Mhm.